You probably know the feeling. You like someone, you want to show up, and before you realize it, you've made yourself endlessly available. You answer texts within seconds, rearrange your day to match hers, and never say no to a late-night call or last-minute plan. At first it seems romantic, even noble. But over time, the dynamic quietly shifts. Instead of inspiring respect, your overavailability starts to feel like background noise. You're always there, so your presence stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a default. In modern US and Canadian dating, the biggest respect leak isn't one huge mistake, it's hundreds of tiny ways you train someone to treat your time, attention, and energy. Mixed signals, vague boundaries, and fear of saying no lead you into situations you don't actually want, with people who don't fully value you. You're not too nice. You're just boundaryless, and boundaryless people slowly disappear in other people's priorities. Stoic philosophy is very blunt about this. Your time and attention are your only real assets. As Marcus Aurelius reminds himself in his journal, you own your mind and your choices, everything else is unstable. When you don't protect your time, you're not being generous, you're outsourcing responsibility for your life to someone else's whims. In dating, that looks like chasing, over-explaining, apologizing for having standards, and silently resenting the other person for taking what you never clearly limited. This lesson is about a different posture, calm, clear boundaries that healthy women actually respect. Not performative alpha behavior. Not games. Just 7 specific lines around your time, your communication, your values, your emotions, your body, your money, and your long-term path. You don't need complicated tactics. You need a small number of non-negotiables you can quietly live by. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, or legal advice. By the end of this episode, you'll be able to do 3 things. First, set clear time and response windows so you're not on call like tech support. Second, make one clean boundary statement instead of hinting and hoping. Third, know exactly what action to take when a line is crossed, so you don't get stuck in endless debates. You'll see how these boundaries actually make attraction easier, because they communicate self-respect without drama. Here's how we'll move through it. We'll walk through 7 Stoic-style boundaries that tend to be respected by grounded women: your schedule, your text habits, your standards, your emotional pacing, your physical pace, your finances, and your long-term direction. You'll see those boundaries play out in a realistic dating story set in North America. We'll recap the core ideas and give you 3 things you can do today, before your next date or DM. Respect begins with your calendar. You keep a life outside of whoever you're dating, and you don't cancel your core priorities to chase a maybe. When your time has structure, your presence feels intentional, not needy. Why it works: people naturally value what has limits. If you're always available, your time feels cheap, even if you're a great person. A defined schedule signals that you have responsibilities, friendships, hobbies, and goals that matter to you. That's attractive because it shows self-respect and stability. It also protects you from drifting into situations where someone sort of sees you but never clearly chooses you. One script you can use: weeknights I keep pretty structured with work, gym, and friends. I usually plan dates a few days ahead so I can give them my full attention. Picture a guy in Chicago who works in tech. He used to reply, "Sure, I can make it," whenever a woman texted him at the last minute, even if it meant skipping his workout or staying up late before a big meeting. He felt excited to be wanted, but he also felt drained and annoyed when she bailed or showed up distracted. After deciding to protect his schedule, he told someone he was seeing, "I can't do it tonight, but I'm free Thursday or Saturday if we plan it in advance." She paused, then said, "Okay, let's do Saturday." On Saturday, she arrived on time, dressed well, and fully present, because the date felt like something real instead of just filling a gap in her evening. Over time, he noticed that women either matched his respect for his time or drifted away. Both outcomes were a win. Your tiny action today: block off 2 recurring weekly time slots for dates or social plans, for example, Thursday evening and Saturday evening, and commit not to cancel your core responsibilities outside those slots just to squeeze in last-minute invites. You set clear communication windows instead of being on your phone like a customer support line. You answer thoughtfully within a reasonable time, but you don't train anyone to expect instant responses. Why it works: when you respond instantly to every message, you unintentionally signal that your attention has no competing priorities. In reality, everyone in adult life in the US and Canada is juggling work, commuting, family, and responsibilities. A normal delay between messages feels grounded. It gives you space to think and reduces anxiety driven over texting. It also makes in-person time feel more special because you're not burning all the conversation over text. One script you can use: I'm not on my phone all day, so if I reply a bit later it's just because I'm focused on work or life stuff. Imagine a nurse in Vancouver who works 12-hour shifts. He meets someone on a dating app and they start texting. At first he feels pressure to answer instantly during breaks, sending long paragraphs while gulping coffee in the hallway. He catches himself feeling resentful when she complains, "You disappeared," after a few hours. The next week he sets a different tone. Early in the conversation he says, "Hey, just so you know, I work long shifts and I'm not always on my phone. I like to respond when I can actually give a real answer." A few days later, he goes 8 hours without checking his phone. When he finally replies, she says, "No worries, I figured you were at work." The whole dynamic becomes calmer. She respects that he has a real job in life, and he stops feeling guilty for not play-by-play texting through his day. Your tiny action today: decide on 2 or 3 message check-in times for the next 24 hours, maybe lunch, early evening, and before bed, and only respond to non-urgent dating texts during those windows. You calmly name your standards once instead of hinting or complaining. You make it clear what you won't participate in: chronic flakiness, disrespectful language, or situations that clash with your values, and then you act in line with that. Why it works: healthy people feel safer when they know where you stand. Indirect behavior, sarcasm, sulking, ghosting, creates confusion and drama. Stoic thinking emphasizes aligning your words and actions, not trying to control the other person. When you say, "This doesn't work for me," and then actually adjust your behavior, you create a stable frame. The other person can choose to rise to it or opt out. Either way, you keep your self-respect. One script you can use: I get that life happens, but repeated last-minute cancellations don't work for me. If that continues, I'd rather not keep trying to make plans. Picture a guy in Atlanta who keeps matching with a woman who reschedules every second date. She's charming over text, always saying, "We have to hang soon," but then cancels the day off with vague excuses. He used to respond with, "No worries, I understand," and suggest another time, then sit there frustrated. After reflecting on his values, he sends one clear message after the third cancellation: "I enjoy talking to you, but I'm looking for someone who can actually follow through on plans. If your schedule stays this unpredictable, I think it's better we don't keep trying to meet." She apologizes, says she's just busy, and disappears. He feels a sting but also relief. 2 weeks later, he's on a date with someone else who shows up on time and texts, "Thanks for planning this." Same city, different dynamic, because he stopped rewarding behavior that doesn't match his standards. Your tiny action today: write down 2 behaviors you're not willing to keep tolerating in dating, for example, chronic texting but no plans, or disrespectful jokes, and commit to saying one clear sentence about one of them the next time it appears. You pace your emotional sharing instead of dumping your whole life story in the first week. You let someone earn access to your inner world over time, through their consistency and their care. Why it works: emotional connection is powerful, but without boundaries it can create an illusion of intimacy. When you overshare too fast, you may feel close, yet you barely know how the other person behaves under stress, in conflict, or across months. Stoic thinking invites you to test someone in real-life patterns, not only in late-night deep conversations. Gradual sharing protects you from attaching to potential instead of reality, and it gives the other person space to reveal themselves too. One script you can use: there's a lot more to my story, and I'm happy to share it as we actually get to know each other over time. Imagine someone in Boston, sitting in a cozy bar on a second date. In the past, he would have poured out his entire history, family drama, every heartbreak, every insecurity, hoping that vulnerability would make someone stay. Instead, he shares a few meaningful details, then stops when he feels the urge to keep going just to fill silence. When she asks a very personal question about an old relationship, he smiles and says, "That's a longer story. I'd rather share it once we've known each other a bit more." She nods, takes a sip of her drink, and responds with her own measured story. Over the next few weeks, they trade more of their histories slowly while going on actual dates, doing normal life activities, and seeing each other's reactions to small frustrations like traffic or delayed reservations. The connection that forms is grounded in reality, not just in intense early sharing. Your tiny action today: choose one personal topic you usually rush into, like past relationships or family issues, and decide that for the next 3 dates with anyone, you will only share the surface version until you see consistent, respectful behavior over time. You set a clear physical boundary and stay aligned with it, regardless of pressure or opportunity. You decide what pace feels right for you and communicate it calmly instead of letting the moment decide. Why it works: physical attraction is natural, but when you let it override your judgment, you often end up in situations that don't match your long-term intentions. As Epictetus would say, your power is in your choice, not in your impulses. Naming your boundary early prevents misunderstandings, protects your emotional well-being, and filters out people who are only interested in a very narrow version of you. Healthy women may not agree with your exact pace, but they respect the fact that you have one. One script you can use: I'm attracted to you, and I also like to take things slow physically until we've built some trust. Picture a guy in Dallas who keeps getting into fast, intense flings that burn out quickly. He tells himself, it just happened, but deep down he knows he's ignoring what he really wants: something with a chance to grow. On a new date, the chemistry is strong. They're back at his place after dinner, and he feels the old pattern trying to replay itself. Instead of going along, he takes a breath and says, I really like where this is going. Just so you know, I'd rather not rush the physical side. I want to get to know you properly. There's a quiet moment. She could tease him, push, or leave. Instead, she says, honestly, that's kind of refreshing, and they shift to talking on the couch. Maybe the connection grows, maybe it doesn't. Either way, he goes to bed aligned with himself, not with a momentary impulse. Your tiny action today: write down in one sentence what taking it slow means for you in concrete terms, and practice saying that sentence out loud so it feels natural before your next date. You keep your financial boundaries clean. You're generous within your means, but you don't try to buy affection, solve someone's financial life early on, or ignore your own budget to impress. Why it works: money exposes values and priorities. When you overspend to prove your worth, you turn dates into auditions and create silent expectations. You also risk building resentment if the other person doesn't respond how you hoped. Stoic thinking emphasizes living within your nature in circumstances, not pretending to be someone else. A clear financial boundary says, I'm willing to invest in experiences we both enjoy, but I'm not an ATM. Healthy partners appreciate honesty about money, especially in cities where dating can be expensive. One script you can use: I'm happy to treat sometimes, and I also like to keep things within a reasonable budget so dating stays fun, not stressful. Imagine someone in Toronto, earning a steady but not extravagant income. In the past, he booked expensive restaurants and surprise gifts early, even putting charges on his credit card to look impressive. When relationships fizzled, he was left with bills and a bitter taste. Now he chooses a different approach. On a third date, the woman he's seeing suggests a pricey rooftop spot. He checks his numbers and says, that place looks great, but it's a bit much for me right now. I know a cozy spot nearby that's more my speed, want to try that instead? She laughs and says, honestly, same, I've been trying to save. They go, have a good time, and split dessert. If she had mocked his budget or pushed pressure, that would have been revealing too, and he would have adjusted his involvement accordingly. Your tiny action today: decide on a realistic monthly dating budget, write the number down, and commit not to go over it for the next 30 days, no matter how excited you are about someone. You protect your long-term direction instead of reshaping your entire life around someone you barely know. You stay committed to your goals, routines, and growth even as you explore a new connection. Why it works: relationships feel most stable when both people have a sense of direction independent of each other. When you quickly give up your plans, moving cities impulsively, skipping important exams, sacrificing key career steps, you put enormous weight on a fragile, early connection. Stoic practice says to distinguish what is in your control, your choices, your habits, from what is not, whether someone stays forever. When you keep showing up for your path, you become more grounded and attractive, and you're less likely to cling to unhealthy dynamics just because you're afraid of being alone. One script you can use: I really like where this is going, and I'm also committed to my own plans with school/work. I'm looking for something that can grow alongside that, not instead of it. Picture a grad student in Seattle who has a clear plan: finish his program, land a role in his field, and stay near his support network. He meets someone incredible who casually says, "You should just move to New York with me when I graduate, we'll figure it out." The fantasy is tempting. He imagines starting over in a new city just for her. Instead of immediately agreeing, he pauses and says, "New York sounds exciting, but I've worked hard for this path. I'm open to long distance for a while and seeing how things evolve, but I'm not dropping my plan overnight." She is momentarily disappointed, then later says she respects that he isn't willing to throw his life up in the air for someone he's only known a few months. If the relationship continues, it's based on two people with grounded lives, not one person orbiting the other. Your tiny action today: list your top 3 priorities for the next 12 months, for example, career move, fitness goal, creative project, and commit not to abandon any of them solely because of a new dating situation. Let's pull this together into one story. Meet Alex, a 31-year-old marketing professional living in Denver. He's dated on and off for years, with a pattern that feels familiar. He meets someone, gets excited, becomes overly available, and then watches the connection fizzle as he bends his life around the other person's schedule and preferences. After a rough breakup where he'd practically moved his routine into someone else's apartment, he decided to approach dating differently, guided by the boundaries we've covered. He meets Jenna on a dating app. She's a nurse who loves hiking on weekends and has a chaotic schedule. In their first few messages, she suggests grabbing drinks sometime soon. Instead of replying, "Whenever I work, I'm free most nights," he draws on his time boundary. He writes, "Weeknights I keep pretty structured with work and the gym. I'm usually free Thursday or Saturday evenings if we plan ahead." She chooses Saturday, and he puts it into one of his 2 pre-decided social slots. Already, his calendar is guiding the interaction instead of his anxiety. As they text during the week, he leans on his communication boundary. He checks messages during lunch and in the evening, not during every lull at work. When he doesn't reply for a few hours during a busy day, Jenna sends a light "hope your day's going okay," rather than accusing him of ignoring her, because he already set the expectation: "I'm not on my phone all day, so if I reply later it's just because I'm focused on work." The tone stays relaxed. He feels present at his job instead of guilty for not performing constant availability. On their second and third dates, deeper topics naturally surface. Alex feels the familiar urge to unload everything: his parents' divorce, his worst breakup, every insecurity. He remembers his emotional pacing boundary and resists the impulse to treat a new person like a therapist. When Jenna asks about his last relationship, he says, "There's a lot more to that story, and I'm happy to share it as we get to know each other more over time." Instead of turning the date into a trauma dump, they keep the conversation balanced and grounded in the present: how they handle stress, what their weeks look like, what they're each building. One Friday, Jenna texts, "Can you do tonight instead of tomorrow? My friend canceled on me." Old Alex would have rushed to say yes, canceling his plans with a close friend to be the hero. New Alex checks his schedule. He has tickets to a game he's been looking forward to. He replies, "I've got plans tonight that I don't want to move. I'm still good for tomorrow if you are." There's a pause, then she responds, "Got it, no worries. Tomorrow works." His time boundary holds, and nothing falls apart. If anything, she respects that his life doesn't revolve around her. As things progress, physical chemistry grows. After a cozy dinner at his place, there's a moment where it would be easy to let the evening slide into old patterns. But Alex remembers his decision about physical pace. Gently, he says, "I'm really attracted to you, and I also like to take things slow physically until we've built more trust." She looks at him searchingly, then relaxes and says, "I appreciate you saying that." They shift to cuddling and talking. It's still intimate, just not rushed. Meanwhile, money and long-term plans come up in small ways. When Jenna suggests an expensive brunch spot every weekend, he doesn't silently stress over his budget. He says, "I love brunch, but if we do it every weekend it adds up for me. How about we alternate between cooking at home and going out?" She laughs and agrees, and they end up discovering a simple pancake recipe they both love. Later, she floats the idea of him transferring to a hospital in another state if she ever moves. Instead of getting carried away, he replies, "I'm open to exploring things in the future, but I've also built a good career path here. I'd want any big move to make sense for both my work and our relationship." 6 months in, the relationship isn't perfect, no relationship is, but it is clearer and calmer than anything Alex has experienced before. He hasn't abandoned his weekly basketball nights, stopped studying for his certification exam, or blown his budget trying to impress. When Jenna has a run of unpredictable shifts and cancels twice in 1 month, he leans on his standards boundary and says, "I care about you, and consistent time together matters to me. If your schedule keeps being this hectic, we might need to rethink how often we're trying to meet." Instead of getting defensive, she talks to her manager and adjusts her schedule slightly. The boundary doesn't guarantee the relationship will last forever, but it keeps Alex from sliding into silent resentment. He feels like a participant in his own life, not a guest in someone else's. The core of this lesson is simple: respect follows clarity. When you bring calm, stoic boundaries into US and Canadian dating, you stop trying to earn worth through overavailability and start living as someone whose time, energy, and values matter. You set limits around your schedule, your communication, your standards, your emotional sharing, your physical pace, your finances, and your long-term direction. You don't argue with people about your boundaries, you state them once and then align your actions with them. Healthy women may not always agree with every line, but they can feel that you respect yourself, and that is what they respect in return. You began by giving your calendar a spine, deciding that dates fit into a life you already value instead of erasing it. You stopped acting like an always-on texting service and moved toward intentional communication windows. Pushed you to name your standards out loud once so that chronic flakiness or disrespect no longer slid by unnoticed. You slowed your emotional sharing, choosing to let real-world consistency earn access to your deeper story. Ask you to define and communicate your physical pace, so that you act from choice rather than pressure. Put numbers to your financial boundaries so you don't try to buy connections or sabotage your stability. Keep your long-term path in view, reminding you that you are building a life, not just chasing a relationship. Then braided those ideas into the story of Alex, showing how ordinary dates can feel completely different when your boundaries quietly hold. Here are 3 do-today steps you can actually measure. First, write down your next 7 days and circle 2 specific evenings you're willing to use for dates or social plans. Treat those as your yes slots and keep the rest of your calendar anchored in your existing priorities. Second, draft 1 clear boundary sentence in your notes app about time, flakiness, or physical pace and commit to using it the next time that situation appears instead of hinting around it. Third, set a 24-hour experiment where you only check and respond to non-urgent dating messages during 2 or 3 pre-chosen times, noticing how much lighter your day feels when your phone isn't driving your attention. If you want a natural follow-up after this, focus on learning how Stoic emotional control applies to dating, how to handle anxiety between texts, interpret mixed signals without spiraling, and choose your actions instead of reacting to every feeling. Boundaries are the frame, emotional steadiness is how you move inside it.